Hello, everyone, and welcome to the broadcast. I'm newtmechanist, and we are continuing our game development project. We found the source of our targeting error yesterday, and we're going to finish up fixing that, and then we're going to clean up the code surrounding it a little bit, hopefully mitigate that more in the future. Before we do, though, let's check in with the kitties. We do have Ember across from the keyboard. We have Sammy down there in the play area. We don't often get one snoozing there. And we have Mason and Sky on the bed. I put out another blanket, a big old plush blanket that he is laying on. The kind of squishy comforter. I wonder if that's why Sammy's not there. Oh, and based on the movement, Sherbet is in his little house by the window, so we've got all five. Let's pop on in here. Make sure everything is flowing. Just check a couple things. There we go. Gotta make sure all the sound systems are functioning. Otherwise, stuff breaks. Okie doke. So what we found was that the targeter that we thought we were using was not the one that we were using. And that was a problem because when the regular targeter determines if it's going to update, if it needs to update the entity, then we do this. We don't have one. Which means if we lose that entity, such as it's removed, it gets another one, which does result in some interesting behavior, but that's not the behavior that I always want. I don't want it to always try to snap to a new target. Or at least we don't want all of them doing that. That is a cool behavior to have, and we might end up using that one a whole bunch. In investigating that, we're going to close you. I ultimately discovered we don't need a special targeting tracker. What we need to do is potentially have a function that initializes them to their defaults, but even then, stuff like this, not really relevant, the set tracked entity. And the reason we don't need that is that the only difference with set tracking and with the tracking set entity hello Ice Drake cheese. Yeah, the we get down into the weeds. And yeah, Cheese, starting a bit early, I do want to try to get more stream time in. It's the coding keeps my enthusiasm up. I'm really enjoying it, and I feel like it's something that folks enjoy too. Zod, this is called GD script. It is one of the two languages that Godot engine supports. The other one is C#. There are enough similarities that I feel like they kind of flow nicely between them. But you can actually use C# libraries in Godot engine. Changes the workflow a bit. But this is the default tracking function I was using, the one for locking onto a target and like pivoting towards it. Cheese, I'm using GD script. In the future, I may add some C# libraries for really computationally intensive stuff. And, maybe in future projects, I might use exclusively C# if I figure out how to optimize for that. But we'll see. Which one is that, Drake? Is it a sci-fi one where you design ships, or something else? Because I've played two sci-fi ones where you build ships. So with tracking, this is the relevant thing: is I don't have an entity and I haven't lost target. Well, we're never going to call tracking set entity unless we call tracking need to update entity default here, which says I have not lost target and I don't have an entity. So this is redundant. We don't need that. So, I'm going to crop this down, but ultimately this is going to be squished into the regular targeter. And hello, Poland. That is from, I saw a series of YouTube videos where they had like anthropomorphized countries that were represented by, circles with their flag as like a little face. I know there was an anime that did that too. It was one of those Pretty Boy Central ones where they were all countries in like World War One, II, presented as like, humans. I'm making a game pull-in ball. Let's verify this is still functional as we move along here. So this is some testing logic going on. We currently have the projectile set to home to a target and then circle it. That's right, Zod. Yeah. But we add ways that we can do stuff like fire more projectiles at once by adding things to these slots. What we want is that the weapon upgrade system is a matter of choosing these upgrades and then slotting them in the weapons you have available to come up with strong combos. With any luck, once we finish it, Poland, it will be on something like Steam. But yeah, this is where we are right now. We are going to be finishing the targeting today, or at least fixing the targeting and potentially adding a little bit of an improvement to it, and then going from there. I remember the discourse on pixel art and CRT monitors has cropped up again. And frankly, I kind of like the extra chunky pixels that result from a high fidelity screen versus the obvious scan lines of the CRT. Yeah, it results in like softer images that can seem less blocky, but I kind of like the blocky. The sprites that we're using are 16 by 16. No sound effects in the game yet, and I want to be careful with that. A common thing with a lot of these bullet heaven games is the sound effects can get really obnoxious. Like, I don't necessarily need a sound effect for every projectile that is launched, every hit of the projectile, and every time I pick up an XP item. After a while, it just becomes a perpetual buzz, But eventually I'll be looking into things like music and sound effects. Those are, I think, later polish elements that I also need to make sure don't interfere with performance. Okay, so the other thing that the tracking was different by, in addition to this, is that if we don't get an entity after we set it, we set that we've lost target. Lost target is relevant because the tracker doesn't reacquire a target if it lost the target. Um, do you mean a visual border around the edge of the game, Zod, or something else? Map wise, it's currently infinitely generating. I can't show it zoomed out because right now the spawn region for enemies zooms way out, so we wouldn't be able to see it very well. But it loads like X screens around the player and will keep doing that forever. It's another performance optimization that I need to tweak so that it doesn't. I need to verify that the images that are rendered way off screen aren't actually being rendered, but they could also be kept in memory, which could eventually be an issue. It might be an issue very far into a run, like ridiculously far, so that might not actually be a problem. Okay. So this is only relevant if we are not reacquiring targets. The whole lost target logic only matters in that scenario. So I can also port this over into the targeter where we go into our set entity default. We don't want to call that. We want to call our function for it. Oh, okay. So right now the pattern would be that there is no like border or traveling to the start or anything like that. It's if you get killed, the run is over. So akin to things like Vampire Survivors, the goal is to either last long enough that the level is forcibly ended, or or you end up being killed. In which case, both of those you stop. Any sort of meta progression happens, and then you choose to start again. Eventually, I want things like different levels and characters, but it wouldn't be like a progression from World 1-1 to World 1-2 kind of thing. Okay, so we call our set entity. So first we have if entity. If we got an entity, then we're going to connect to it. Not yet. I suspect things like achievements will be a little later in the process where we're tuning gameplay, as far as the kind that we would want to put in. But that's kind of necessary from a development perspective. Is having things like achievements. Same way as right now there is no controller support, there needs to be controller support, that kind of thing. Okay, if there's an entity, we connect to it. Else if there is not an entity and we are not allowing retarget, then lost target is equal to true. Hey there, Yassine. Welcome. So what we've got here is if we got an entity, then we need to connect to it. In order to get the event that says if the entity goes away, unhook from it, that kind of thing, remove the target. then if we didn't get an entity and we're not allowed to retarget, we're going to set lost target. This will be used elsewhere. Then let's need update target. Need update entity. And allow retarget. Or it's supposed to let me do that. Yeah, there we go. I have to make sure that I keep it in a parenthetical. Platformer is a classic place to learn game dev. The whole way that you operate within the game is kind of a known commodity. And there's actually most of the game development engines now have logic for baking in things like gravity, leaping, that kind of stuff. Okay, if we don't have an entity and we're allowed to retarget, then we need to update the entity. Or we don't have an entity and we're not allowed to retarget and we haven't lost target. Start doing that. Kind of like that code convention. Where one of the suggested code conventions that I was reading today before stream was to double indent if we're wrapping a single line. So this is breaking up the set entity's what's it called? I think the function signature onto 3 lines to make it so that it doesn't run really long. It's more readable. In order to denote that or to make it stand out from the indentation of the parts of the function, we double indent it. I like that. It's clearer. Okay. So we only need to update the entity if we don't have one and we're allowed to retarget, or we don't have one and we're not allowed to retarget and we haven't lost target. So if we can't retarget and we have lost the target, we're still not going to update it. And we should always try to update the direction. We can override this if we need to. Let's see. Set direction and set entity will be things that get overridden, like set entity to player, set entity to random enemy. these are things that set entity would be overridden to, and set direction gets overridden to. Like, always give me a random direction. I'm eventually going to have this be shut down. I just don't like naming it remove. Okay, we get the remove me signal we call clear. That is, if we have one, we disconnect it and we null the entity. So our set values call, so if we need to update the entity, we do that. We call our set entity. Then if we get one, we connect it. Let's do this to be sure. If we set the entity for the first time, we have not lost the target. How would I create proper code structure? It depends on what I'm trying to make. If I'm just doing a straight up operation, like call this function to do a thing, I would just do a static function. Your classic, void main kind of thing. In this particular case, I'm structuring it by objects, and I am seeking to I'm seeking to make it as flat as possible within that still. That's why the targeter is using almost like a lambda structure. How long have I been streaming? In general, going on 4 years now. What do you mean single space per code? Cleaning up this function to see this whole file to see how I like this new pattern. And I kind of do. Much more legible. Oh, so some of this is because of the way GDScript works. So function signatures in GDScript are func, function name, parameters in parens, colon, then everything after this that is indented one line is part of this function. So this function appearing like this ends this function. I'm adding these additional lines here for legibility, this extra tab, to denote that this is all together and that this isn't part of it. But yeah, GDScript is not a curly brace language, so you don't encapsulate there's a word for this, for this code block. You don't encapsulate like an if or something like that in braces to denote its area. Demon Fox, we are making a game. We're making a bullet heaven, which is like Vampire Survivors, if you're not familiar with the recent naming of that genre. Okay, so we don't need the special functions for tracking like this. We need to change update direction similarly here. Toho is like a bullet hell. Or Toho is categorized as a bullet hell, where you are dodging the rain of bullets. In a bullet heaven, the gimmick is that the rain of bullets originates from you. The mechanic in that case is you hold off waves of enemies with the offense, as opposed to carefully weaving through the offense of the enemy in order to win. I'm not super fond of Bullet Heaven because it is... Knowing what a Bullet Heaven is largely requires you to know what a Bullet Hell is. You know, so Lunar, we have not added a speed typing a novel real quick, but that would actually be a fun thing to add in, is the sort of typing game mechanics that we see in some of them lately. And hello, Supersonic again. As a reminder, folks, if I seem to be talking to somebody you can't see in chat, I am talking to somebody in one of the other chats. So a lot of you are in the tall format. There is a pinned link to the wider format. There's also Twitch, but most of you are in tall right now. Favorite playthroughs on the channel. I really wish that I had been doing YouTube VODs when we played through a game called Tunic. That was a lot of fun. It included the over 1 or 2 minutes straight of me reciting directions for the Golden Path code. It was like a Konami code that never ended. Let's see. What are some other fun ones? Oh man, I don't know. Some of the Phoenix Wright ones have been good. Ace Attorney Chronicles was a fun one in that. Hello, Mud. Hello, Mud. And how did I become a YouTuber? I just kind of started. It's kind of like coding or making a game. You just kind of start. If you go way back, Ice Drake, some of the VODs in the shorts will be from a game called Noida. And that's where a lot of the art in Similar originates. For this game, for my character, that kind of stuff. The whole concept starts out in a mod that I was writing for that. Doing well, Mud. Doing well. What was I doing? Okay, need to update entity. We covered that. Need to update direction. Okay, this directional changing is only relevant to things that track the entity. Thank you, Sonic. We're not a big channel, but we try. We keep working. So update direction is only relevant to like tracking it face wise. So Ice Drake in the game Noida, especially once we started to mod it, the goal became not to explore the game world or anything like that. I actually was not fond of the way that they did exploration. It was kind of opaque and fiddly at times. But I love the wand building system, and that is the inspiration for the weapon building system in this game. But our goal in the game was to reach the default final boss. I can't remember what his name was, but it was the big spider at the bottom of the world. And see how big a number we could do in a one-shot kill. The biggest number we got, if I recall, was in the quintillions. And a running gag was not how many frames per second we would have during it. It's how many frames per minute we could keep. We would have times that the final boss kill was effectively a one-hit kill, but it took us like 10 minutes to find that out. In the process of doing that, we found a lot of limitations of that game engine. Okay, so this is facing target, is what this needs to be. That was the balance there, Zod. That was the balance, is we wanted to beat the game super hard. We wanted to just do bonkers numbers. But we didn't want it to crash because then we wouldn't get to see the bonkers numbers. So it was finding that balance, finding out how much stuff can we make happen at once, but that the game would keep running. So this is need to update direction. This is entity dependent. You spell dependent. Yes. Okay. If we don't have an entity and we don't have a direction, we're going to update the direction if it's entity dependent. Otherwise, there needs to be an entity. Let's see. The cat that we can see mud is Mason. So let's see who else is on camera. So Sky's up in his tree, Ember's across from the keyboard, and Sherbet is in his little house. So not visible is Sammy. Sammy is loafed up by the water fountain. So this is, if we only update the direction based on the entity present, then we're going to use this as our pattern here. And we can keep that one line. So this is default. If we don't have a direction, we update direction. And by default, we it is dependent on if we allow retargeting. Okay. Yep, that should work as default. Then we need this one to be a set direction. Okay, so this will this is going to rotate toward the target here. Hello, Sky. Okay. So then, when we are defining, we're defining the homing movement here. Targeters, target player, random direction, random enemy, track random enemy. Here we go. We don't do this anymore, and we're just going to make it a targeter. It will be its set entity. And then our need update direction is going to be need to update direction entity dependent. A long name. Callable, which is the targeters. That. Well, thank you, Zod. I appreciate it. And then set direction. Set direction, rotate toward entity. Okay, did we break it? Oh, it working. Now we need to make sure allow retarget is false. Oh, there's still retargeting. Long function. Long object. Ah, okay, we need the lost target to get set. Lost target is not getting set. Move me. If there was an entity, if not allow retarget, lost target is equal to true. Something's definitely going wrong here. Once again, going wrong still looks pretty cool, but it's not what it's supposed to be doing. So these mice here aren't homing to a new target. These are they're just staying where they are, oh, okay. That is because when we initialize it, Lost target equals false. We're using a pooling structure, so that's what was going wrong there. We also need to figure out a way to make the face target not make this go haywire. Okay, we are now at the point where pooling happens with the movement, so... Okay, we have not lost our targeting here. So what this is demonstrating right now is the mouse is set up to select a random monster. It's set up to home to that target, to rotate to face that target. And it's set to not retarget. So we can set it, we could make a targeter that will retarget. So if it loses its target, it goes to find another one. We could do things like closest target, all kinds of stuff. But that is working now. That is working now. So let's pause for a moment here. We'll do a commit. Hey. I know, right, Taz? Didn't take us too long to get in here. Didn't take us too long to get to this. Let's just do some code style adjustment here. Next. Okay. We want logic to allow subsequent targeters and targeters to use the same direction and entity that prior ones use. I'm going to close this file. Delete that. Delete that. But the project's still okay. No, I wonder what happens if we do this. Wow. So there is some flaw in the logic of the orbiter, because each one is really pushing hard to have it at a particular position in the circle. I do eventually want to change that to a, instead of it determining the vector by rotation like that, by saying, oh, here's the point above me, and the next tick it'll be this point, then the next tick this point, is instead determine the rotation by saying this is a vector that is derived from a circle. So I know that every time I'm going to rotate the vector this much and apply it, rotate it this much and apply it, so that it doesn't care that it's not applying a straight line between these two. I just know how fast this one rotates, how big the circle is. Then we can also adjust it towards the target. But some of the confusion here is that they're targeting multiple things. And that's what we're going to change right now. Transform get type. Explain this in a moment. So we're going to change these into variables in a moment. And what they mean is each one we're going to get the entity in the direction from the prior one. And each time we're going to say, okay, does the next one want it? We're going to offer it to them. It's a individual targeter may accept it or reject it. So we're going to have a default one where it does nothing. It just passes it. That is a reject. There will be another function that I'll have that is accept. And what it'll do is it will take that direction or that entity and it will fill it in. What that can mean is that it immediately acquires it. Now we're going to need to make sure that all of the proper logic happens, this kind of stuff, where like I need to have subfunctions for this kind of stuff. So, a follow-up to entity is set. And a follow-up to things like the entity is removed. I think we'll be okay as long as we have this. As long as we encapsulate that. What will we call it? That's where we actually set the entity, and then we follow up with the with these values. We'll just call it set entity follow up. Which is this. verify it's still working. Waiting for this to buffer up sufficiently. All right, we are buffered. These are debugging numbers. In particular, it's these numbers after the colons that are important. Once they exceed 100, in general, you'll see they don't go past. They don't grow much after that. There is a buffer of them. So we reuse the old objects instead of freeing them up. Within a limit. So once we hit 100 objects in the buffer, we start reusing them. The buffer is so far above 100 because every time we launch a mouse, we're launching like 27 at a time. Hello, projector. Welcome. I do find Godot to be a solid programming language, or at least development engine there. Nice. I do. Okay. Yeah, set entity follow-up. Where it is an entity, and we just pass. Unreal is a powerful engine. It can do a lot. Entity accept takes offered, and we say entity equal to offered. We're making a bullet heaven style game, so vampire survivors, bioprototype, that kind of thing. This is offer direction. Typing, can you do it? Equal to offered. Okay, then we go into the targeter and we set it to its defaults in the init. We have that in here, don't we? Ah, okay, it's not underscore. Entity is a callable. Direction is a callable. And in our init, default, we reject the offer here. Entity. So what we're doing is saying, like, if the offer happens, we reject it by default. Run it, make sure we didn't break it. Okay. Real quick commit. Just in case. Just in case. Rid of some unused files there. Few too many things done in that commit at the same time, but we're slow to do it. Back in. So now we have this offer logic. What we can do is in movement. So if we have a next movement, we say next movement targeter offer Okay, we're gonna wrap that. We're gonna wrap that. Cookie, we are writing a game. We're writing a game in Godot engine. Okay, so we're gonna go to offer entity here. Okay, did put function. Oh, that's right. That's why. Okay, so these need to be actual functions. This is internal offer entity. For entity call with offered. direction. Say offered vector 2. It calls offer direction. All with the offered value. Hey, Zelcade, welcome back. Welcome back. Offer direction. Offer that. Callables. Then in movement, targeter, offer entity, this will be targeter get entity. To move. Same thing for the direction. This could be a problem the way we're doing it. I'm going to say direction here. It should have an entity and direction by this point. We need to work on this logic as to whether I reference these variables directly or I call a get. What this allows us to do is if I have two entities that say, hey, or two targeters that say select a random monster, that they can accept an entity and say, okay, I'll just take what you gave me. So this would make it so that they track the same thing if I set this. So targeter dot offer entity callable getter dot offer accept. So these will what this should cause it to do is take the same target as the first one. So it'll just move way faster. So we're still seeing aberrations in that the circling conflicts with itself, but they're not like whipping back and forth to different targets. Okay. Okay. Tracks random enemy. Then we're going to look at movement. It's not, let's see, target player is orbit player. Then we are going to have move track enemy here as the default on the mouse. Sammy was crying about something. Okay, so this should just make the mouse move towards one of the enemies there. So move track enemy does not accept values currently. So here, let's show it again. Each time it fires, it's possible that it will accept multiple targets that are different from each other. So we should start to see the possibility that a mouse will slow way down if I start adding more track enemies here. Actually, those aren't track enemies. Those are move straight lines, I think. Mobs. Adding the homing mouse. Actively adding that right now. Doing some cleanup here. Okay, no, we are adding move track enemies. Then if we look in the catalog for move track enemy, by default it should reject it. So every time it is selecting a new random enemy. There we go. That very slow-moving mouse is fighting with itself over which enemy to target. This is why I kind of want to have some of these available, is that it can result in these like unexpected movements. But I don't know how viable they will be. So if instead we go in and say, so target track random enemy in targeters, we could say offer entity callable targeter so we'll accept the offered entity if we are doing track. So what this should do is every track entity I add will accelerate the mouse. is they should be able to turn faster and move faster in a straight line. You can still get aberrations here. So I think this is... It's like they're reacquiring targets. Let's go into our targeter and our offer entity accept. So if okay, we can get some aberration in here. So this is if offered. So we don't care if we are not offering anything. If we allow retarget, then we'll do that. Otherwise, let's add another paren here. Or and we don't allow retarget and not lost target. If we have lost our target and we don't allow retargeting, then we're not going to accept a new target. In which case, we then disconnect the existing entity. And we set a new one. Set values. This will actually update the entity. There is a risk surface here, is that if we need to update and then we set it, so we're going to do a disconnect here. If entity, we already check for that disconnect if entity. So no matter what, we're going to say disconnect, then set a new one, then potentially connect. Is if I am updating the entity, then I need to make sure that this function isn't going to linger, that we're not going to have a dangling function call. Right there. That shouldn't be happening because it should be accepting the existing. So the targeter accepts a new entity. If it loses it, it keeps going the direction that it was going. If we accept a new entity, we clear our lost target. If we have no entity and we're not allowed to retarget, we will set lost target. And once we've set lost target in something that doesn't allow retargeting, we're never resetting that again. But if we set this to nothing, then all of the subsequent ones lose their ability to lock on. Because the only way that that can happen is if I do this. That should have a next movement now. Because that's not working the way I think it's working. In collision zone. We call entity move. Wait. Doesn't make a lot of sense. We're not setting up the movement chain. Instead, we are creating an array of movement objects. And we have next movements here. We don't need to be doing it that way. Oh wait. We're not creating the movement chain though. It doesn't make sense that it would stack them like that then. As might be apparent, something isn't right. So we initialize it, that creates the whole mass there. We're going to set our values. We're creating our base movement collection here. Creating them from templates. We do not call create movement chain. So none of this is happening. Our next movement thing is not happening. Okay, this is where it's relevant. This is where it's relevant. This is where we need to add that logic. It's in the entity that we're iterating over that. So in the move of movement, we had this stuff here. We're going to instead take that. We need to include this stuff too. But we'll get there. Movement. If prior movement, then you know what? It keeps wanting to do this, so we're going to do it that way. Marketer entity. Same thing for direction. Shouldn't just be stopping like that. They should all have the same target at that point. 9223372. It just got offered a movement. So prior has an entity, which is the blob. Movement got offered it, but didn't accept it. Catalog, target, track random enemy. Wait, is it using target random enemy or track random enemy? Let's verify. Be the first time that we mess that up. Using move track enemy. Then it's track random enemy. So then when we're loading targeters, target track random enemy. Does not allow us to retarget, and it will accept an offer entity. So we have a prior movement, which has a targeter, which has an object. Right there. To step into. It's going into reject. Should be going into accept. Oh, because we're not setting those in apply template. Right here. Callable. The other way. Okay, so movement currently has no entity. And then after this, movement has an entity. Okay. So you can see they're moving faster towards their target now. Now faster still. So this is target random enemy is going to say, well, if something else already has a target, then I'll accept that as what I'm trying to use. So if we orbit player first, the player is now the target. If we orbit player later, we should see a distortion in the movement because orbit player by default rejects that change. So we can see that there's a little bit of swing at the edge of the orbit. The mice are trying to move out towards their target entity. Very nice, very nice. Look at that effect. See how they arc out and come back in. So, adding in multiple bursts like this, I do want to make sure that the logic is firing properly, because right now it's just adding extra delays. Like this, this is supposed to always be a 1, 2, 3, and it's just not working that way. They had no target, so they're just kind of drifting. Very nice. So, which part of the weapon cycle it's on task is a bit tricky, because that's happening every frame, just about. So, if we look at this, so everything that's happening is at the beginning here. It's built into the mouse. When I add a spread, those are happening right there at the start. With a burst, there is a sequence in it. So there's a delay portion where this is still in effect. So this, like the burst one, the little 3 dots, does have a state where it's active. Like every so often, it is active. But I think that might be what we're getting at then, is knowing that this whole chain of spawning is still going. Wondering if there's a way. So one thing might also be to look at this and say, there are 3 spread shots. Can I flatten them together? Same with a burst. Can I flatten it together? Because a burst of 3, burst of 3, burst of 3, it'd probably be better to say it's a burst of 27. Hey, Frederick. It's going pretty well. Going pretty well. I wonder if that's a way to approach it. Like, how would we flatten similar ones? Because that might be a way to reduce complexity. So today, 1 second here. Let me get a commit done here. So we fixed an issue with the targeting, where it was retargeting when it's not supposed to. So a homing projectile lost its target. It's the ones that I had made were supposed to just keep going when that happened. So if they don't have a target, just keep moving in whatever direction you were moving. Eventually, we're going to make ones that don't behave that way, that they will acquire a new target as soon as they lose their existing one. Right, and there were several reasons for that happening. We've addressed that, and we've actually somewhat simplified the targeter. It's still not the clearest thing, just from glancing at the code, but it does what it's supposed to. We've added the ability for series of targeting logic to pass values along. So all three of these arrows and the mouse itself all have a built-in logic that says home into a target. So keep turning to face that target at a particular rate. Previously, if I stacked up these three, there would be 4 individual random enemy targets, and the projectile would fight with itself. Which isn't good. So instead, each one of them can say, I will offer my target in my direction to subsequent targeters. That targeter can be set up to ignore the things that it's offered and do its own thing, but many of them are going to accept that value. I'm going to have to add some extra logic in there, is to say it will accept the same type kind of thing. But we don't have that complexity yet. So right now they home to target. If I put an orbit player at the beginning here, all of these mice, and you'll see them kind of arc in a little bit. They're kind of drifting inward on the circle. They are trying to home to the player and simultaneously obey the orbit. If I put the orbit after the homing targets, it will still orbit the player, but the mice are going to start to drift out of the circle because they're trying to home to a target that is away from the player. If I take this out, they're going to resume hunting blobs soon enough, I think. Oh, we got to take it out of there. There we go. So there's still some wiggle in how this needs to work. But one of the current thoughts is, what do I do about iteration, like multiple copies of the same general pattern? So 3 spread shots here. Right now, what this is doing is saying, okay, each one of them fires, and each one of those is then a group of 3, and each one of those is a group of 3. What I want to be able to do is say, okay, merge these things. What I'm thinking of doing is saying merge these things. So instead of this being 3 separate groups of clusters of 3 resulting in 27, it would be one spread of 27. Same way with orbits in spirals, is if I stack those, right now they're going to misbehave. Because they're going to be conflicting with each other. I can adjust the logic. Ultimately, I want to adjust the logic on orbits and spirals to be friendlier with other movement types. But if I put two spirals or two orbits on top of each other, I don't know. Maybe they need to stack. That's the thought there, Lunar, is right now, what happens is when I spawn these, it's saying, okay, convert the arc in the number of projectiles into angles and adjust those angles. But a possibility would say, like, okay, I have 3 following 3. That means 9 of them. And can I combine them into the proper arc, essentially? Because you can see the arc does expand a little bit each time. Now it's almost a 180. Now it's more than that. That's part of the problem is I want this weird behavior. I want these things where it's not bad behavior, but it results in interesting patterns, you know? What we currently get when we add the 90s together, these are 90-degree spreads. So the first one comes out at 90 degrees. Subsequently, the edge 2 are a 90-degree arc. So we add another 45 degrees to each side, so now we're at 180. Same way again, we add another 45 degrees on the edge, and now we're at like 270-ish. They're homing, so it's harder to spot it. Let's make it wiggly just for extra weird. Actually, let's spiral it. Yeah, that's right, Frederick. We want a... Anytime you add it, you should have an idea of what it's going to do. Now, the actual result could be muddied wildly because of permutations. Which order you put them in, which bundles they're part of, that kind of thing. But I need to make sure that every one of them mixes cleanly. And right now, spirals and orbits do not mix cleanly. The way that they operate is not great. Because right now I'm using angular velocity, and what I actually want to do is speed around the circle, which is a completely different calculation. Like speed around the circumference, not speed of the rotation from the center kind of thing. Because then if I'm calculating that properly, if I'm rotating properly as I go around the circle, then I can probably do that. I can probably do that and say I can do it as a transform. Because I know the velocity. I know how fast it's going. And I know how much I rotate it each time. Because then I know how quickly it rotates in a circle. If I say it's rotating at 60 degrees a second, it should take it 6 seconds to perform a full rotation. Let's look at that after a short break. Testing. There we go. How annoying. Ah, going to need to figure out how to resolve the microphone problems. Longer term. Right now, my microphone can just randomly fail. Okay, so currently, what we do with a spiral is first we're going in and determining, like, how fast is it going to move. I don't mind scuff, I just don't like it when I think I'm talking to everybody and they can't hear me. Um, use the direction as a basis. Direction as a basis is a good starting point, but we don't actually care about this with a spiral. What we care about is we want to know our distance from our target if we have it. If we don't know the distance from the target, then we don't really care about the radius. Putting it another way, it's going to come out in a given direction. So we're going to start by applying that direction. That's our 0 direction. Then subsequently, but we don't need to do anything with that. It's whatever direction comes in is what we're dealing with. We can respect our target or direction. Anyway, every time, though, what we're going to do is we're going to rotate that vector. Sort of lunar. It's, if we have a target, then we want to be a particular distance around the target. That's where our radius comes in. Like, that's where we want to be. So we need to make sure that we're rotating towards that as well. I mean, we're kind of doing that, is the trick. So this is where we're going. This is where we should be at. All right, right now we're asserting too much of a... We're pushing too hard on it. Like, next point to prior point, or prior point to next point. This is the absolute distance. We'll get a problem if that doesn't align with angular velocity, though. So, yeah, spelling this out, right now the speed of the rotation is a number of degrees per second. So, again, like 60 degrees, 6 seconds per full rotation. Which means, as far as the actual, like, velocity of the object rotating, it increases in speed the further out you get. Hello, Sean. Welcome. Hello, Ember. Are you going to come join me? Huh? Ember is deciding whether she wants snuggle time here. She's unsure if she just wants to be a nuisance or if she wants attention. Well. Hmm? Come here. Come here. No. Oh. Instead, what I'm thinking is if we do a fixed rotation each frame equal to the delta modified angle that I rotate at, that will get us the that will get us a time to go around the circle. I'm sorry, that will define the to some extent the radius of the circle. We still have a concept of rotation in that, though. I think that's okay. And then the speed will determine how much ground it covers during that. And then we can add a push or a pull towards the target based on how much distance from the target it's supposed to be. Modified by speed as well. So it can speed up or slow down in order to reach where it's supposed to be. We'll have to adjust that so it doesn't jitter in place, but let me comment spell this out here. So we have a speed of motion. Oh, what kind of game are you trying to make, Sean? This is how much we turn it. So I think we can still preserve the rotation because whatever direction our targeter is telling us, that's what we're rotating. Yeah. So this is how fast we're going to take the rotation from our targeter. So whatever direction we get from our targeter, we take that and we'll rotate it accordingly. Pretty much, Dr. Frederick, pretty much. We're using Godot engine, Sean. Okay, so let's adjust this whole mess here. What are you using now? Ah, I originally used Unity, and I find Godot engine to be better. I also find the people behind Godot not to be, evil. Let's assume some fixed values for now. So the radius is going to increase over time. That will affect the push-pull force here. Then the direction of rotation will be based off of whatever we've got to start with. Um, does movement have by default? Been a bit since I've messed with the core of this. Don't have next movements anymore. Okay, so we just have adjustments. Okay. Max radius, how quickly the circle grows, and how fast the angle changes. Okay. We won't actually need this, because every time we're just going to add our rotation angle. Reading back through the code here. This converts it back down to 360. This determines our current angle change with the circle. So this will be our growth rate. How quickly it expands the radius. Then this we can condense down to following. It's equal to targeter.direction. Always be getting a direction out of it. Yeah, we should always be getting a direction. But Actually, don't know which Unity uses for that. If not target direction, then target direction is equal to vector2, right? Okay, then target direction is equal to target direction dot rotated we need all of this. This is how much we're changing the angle, so we're going to use last angle here, which is going to be degrees to radians last angle. So this is our target direction as far as which way we should be going on the circle. For the time being, we are going to multiply it out by our movement rate here. And then we're going to look at our distance from where we should be. So we're expanding out to our radius target here. Care about prior points anymore. So here's our radius calculation. Movement rate is in squares, okay. So this is where we should be. This is only going to work for circles at the moment. So if targeter dot entity as an entity is equal to this, so we don't call get twice. here. Yeah. If we have one. Then we need a distance from the entity to move to the target entity. Okay, we need our current distance from the target, and the radius is where it should be. Two is equal to target entity position, this entity to move position. Let's do this the other way around. Okay, so from what we're orbiting to the thing that is the thing doing the orbiting, this is the full vector from here to there. If we target dot length squared does not equal radius squared, then we're going to do a thing. So this is, we're not in position yet. We're going to take 2 target and multiply it. We're going to get the distance here. This is how far it actually is. And we need... Okay, no, we have the direction that we need to move in. This is the point between them. It is supposed to be a particular distance out. If the distance is too big, it needs to come in the opposite So we would subtract is radius we're using distance squared because it's a cheaper calculation. We don't have to do a square root to get it. So we're going to use the movement rate unless it's bigger than the distance. We'll just get straight up distance here. It'll save us the calculation. The subsequent square root calculation in the field there, but we'll have to do it anyway, so might as well get it done. If distance is greater than movement rate, target dot normalized times movement rate. Else so we don't move it, we won't push it any further than the distance here. Don't care about any of that. Okay, so then we go into our catalog and edit this directly. Not quite, not quite. We're getting kind of an oscillation here. But player is going to target the player. Okay, so we're getting the right general idea here. Like, you can see it is moving along a partial arc, but we're getting this wobble. Let's look at our math. So right now it's 180 degrees a second. So every 2 seconds we should complete a full rotation. I think that might be our problem here. Is every 2 seconds we're doing a 180 flip here. Let's slow that way down. Okay, we need to account for the possibility that we need to account for the difference between the angular velocity and the radius growth rate here. Because we could do things like rotations per second, but that isn't really covering it here. Because what I'd want is that this makes the circle go very fast, but that's not really the case. Because what we're getting is that the... Let's remove the blobs just for... the ability to fully observe what is happening. So they're not getting all the way around the circle in the time frame that we're dealing with. The vector pushing it to the side is not moving fast enough. Which means we don't really want it to be based off of... It turns based on how far around the circle it has gotten. Not based on... It should be turning based on the distance around the circle, not based on the angle, because the angle is not being controlled here. That's not what's causing it to move. Just because 1 second has passed does not mean 180 degrees has been crossed. Rotate very slowly. This does look extra odd just because the mice face the vector that they're moving in. Just the nature of the mice as far as how I've set them up. I mean, this is generally doing what it's supposed to, though. The fact that they're sliding back isn't what they're supposed to do. Because it's coming out at vector right, and then it's being pushed wildly to the left, which shouldn't be that sort of rotation. If we determine the radius, we can determine the circumference. Then if we know the growth rate, we can determine the actual angular change. Like how often we should be rotating. All right, let's consider this here. Let's ignore angular change as far as this is concerned at the moment. We're going to calculate this. Similarly here, we don't actually... Every frame, we are going to rotate a fixed amount. We don't care about the last angle of rotation. No, we still do. We still do. So we'll just calculate the angle changed out here. Circumference. Okay. Spelling. It's what I'm trying to do is figure out based on like how far out it's supposed to be from them and how fast it moves. How long does it take to go around the circle? That will determine the rate of rotation of the vector. As opposed to right now, we're doing it like it's clock hand rotation. So I take the clock hand and I rotate it 30 degrees. That has there's 360 degrees around it. So however fast I rotate it is how quickly it completes that circuit. But if it's only moving at like 5 units per second, that doesn't mean that it will have actually traversed the circumference in that time. I may be making it spin in place without completing the circuit. Uh, we need to get the max radius regardless. Right, all of that up here. No, it's 2 pi r. R squared is the area. Hey, didn't it? No. We'll get there. Don't want delta in movement rate yet. This is kind of crude, but we're going to get there. So this is how many seconds it will take us to get around the entire circle at the rate that we're moving. So then angle change is equal to 360 divided by segments. We're going to have to go in and scrub this function something fierce because we are just kind of brutalizing it at the moment. Target player is going to create an anomaly with this behavior. There's a weird force that's going to be applied to this. Start with this and see what happens. Oh, times constants square width. Now we go to the catalog. We set you to 180. Doesn't change because it's the movement rate. that matters. Base angle change doesn't matter under this logic. Okay, now we're going to need to change fundamentally how some of this behaves. Oh man, we're getting that that optical illusion where it looks like they're going backwards. Very cool. So then what if... All right, we need to slow it down for this. We need to separate growth rate from rotational speed here. And we also need to soften some of the push here, because it's really forcing it to stay to stay at the edge. Blobs back in. Because right now they get told to orbit the player, so this will always consume player. It will say home to player. So if we go into our catalog, load movements, target random enemy with this. We need to make sure that there are enemies. There should be blobs spawning. Lunar, that's kind of what we were doing, and the problem with that is that well, that's actually kind of what we're doing right now. Is this logic right here is if I have a target entity... Wait a minute. Double check this. I don't see where the blobs are, but clearly the mice do. More blobs. Way more blobs. Way faster than it's capable of doing, but... what I'm trying to get it to do... We are getting entities removed. This buffer increasing tells me there are entities going away. Yeah. The mice are appearing, and then something is getting struck right away. So the pivot point is actually what we're trying to avoid, Lunar. Is we don't... Well, how to phrase this? Here. But another way, that's what we're doing. So this creates that 2x4 that you're talking about. This is the bar that extends to where on the radius it is. So no matter where the entity is, it should be around here. Like at this point around the target. Then we get the actual distance from it. Like, what's the distance to where it should be? If that distance is greater than the movement rate, we're going to use the movement rate. Otherwise, we're just going to use the distance. We don't want it to get any closer than that. So we're adding an additional bit to the target direction. This creates the... this adds that 2x4 effect, is that I have the that right angle off of the circle, which is how fast around the circle it's moving. And then I have the tether force here that should be getting applied, but we're not actually seeing this happen properly. getting 0 each time. How is that possible? All of these are 0. It's targeting a blob. That blob is not at 0, 0. It's quite far from that, in fact. The homing mouse has appeared at 0, 0. Okay, we have an actual distance, and our to target is correct. Okay. Radius is currently 0. It shouldn't matter. It's like it's moving way too fast. And our movement rate is 0. Because delta is 0. And if we remove the blobs, if we do have a target, everything is going haywire. Yeah. The blobs are getting instantly struck. Hello, blocker. That's why we're not seeing them. It's like teleporting on top of them. I see. Step through this logic here. So this is the first one, and I don't think we're gonna have a target entity here. Let's look at our targeter. We currently have no target entity, but we are going to get one very shortly. Okay, in this instance, it doesn't have a target entity, so we should... Yeah, we have no target entity, so we skip this part. We just do the straight line motion. This time we come back around, removing the homing mouse. This is the homing mouse that exists moving. Okay, we need a whole bunch of blobs so that I can properly track this. It's interesting. Okay, all of these should have targets when they spawn now. There's way more blobs than projectiles flying. Radius is 0. It's got a divide by 0 there. That is a weird result from that. We're only getting zeros. It is absolutely just teleporting. Cheese, yes, we got the tracking bug out of the way. We're trying to make spiraling motion like circling and the like play better with other motion types. So that we can properly combine it, but currently that's not working. We should revisit what we were thinking there. Reconsider Lunar's thought. The push-pull of the radius is the trickier element, because we can't just push out from center. So that vector still needs to be in place. Do this less frequently, but for now, we're fine. Several different ages, Cheese. Most of them are under 3. Sammy's a little over 2. Mason and Sherbet are under 2. Ember is 3 or older. Sky is at least 8, I think. I'd have to check their papers, but they vary in age. Radius is very small at this point. This doesn't seem right. No, it's pretty much accurate. In this case, it's moving way faster. Like, it's at this speed, it's going all the way around almost immediately. Might have to think on this one a little bit more. We do get... If we were to take the difference there, and then we transform the whole thing by the angle of rotation. Yeah, I think we need to plot this whole thing back out. So with that in mind, we'll have to pick that up tomorrow, which is the next planned stream. I should be able to toggle it visibles pretty soon. So today we fixed targeting, and we've got it to where it's mostly doing what we want. The current thing we're trying to do is get kind of circling motion functional such that it plays nice with other things. Right now, it's like forcing it into a known position. So we look at a point on a circle and say it should be there, and we try to shove it to that position, which is making it conflict with all other motion. We want to be able to expand the rotation out. So I think we still need angular motion around it, such that the rate of completing the circle is the fixed thing. So if I say it does a full rotation in 1 second, that means it doesn't matter if that rotation is to the edge of the screen in radius or if it's right up next to you. That should simplify things. But it's figuring out how to get it to do that cleanly. So we still want that general vector of this point to next point. And to apply that, yeah, that's kind of where we were going, Doctor, as far as determining this is how far you are out from the center and whether you need to be pushed further or pulled in. And then the direction around the circle, because we need to be able to constrain the edge of it. But yeah, we're gonna have to puzzle this one out a bit, because it's not straightforward compared to any of the other motion we're doing. So that'll be next time. But this kind of motion is kind of critical. At a bare minimum, we need a movement type that is orbit the player. That is just classic. We can't skip that one. Eventually, I also want things like this projectile orbits the other projectile. So a modifier that says, hey, create this other projectile and it will rotate around the base projectile of the weapon. That would be cool. We should have that. But to do that, first we need this sort of rotation. But we'll get there. I hope everybody had fun today. I don't get what you're asserting there, Cheese. If you've got a formula that you're suggesting, then swing on through the Discord and pop it there. But yeah, we'll pick this up tomorrow. I do hope everybody had a good time tonight. And if you haven't already, consider liking, following, subscribing, that kind of thing. It helps the channel grow. And in the meantime, I hope the rest of your day is a good one. Night, everyone.